The rule was announced on a calm morning when most people were busy with their usual routines. It came from the Central Space Council, a group known for strict decisions that shaped how different species lived among the stars. The message was direct. Humans were not allowed to build warships. They were told they were too new to the galaxy, too inexperienced, too emotional, and too unpredictable to be trusted with anything powerful. The council explained that humans had energy and creativity, but they lacked the discipline required to control a heavy combat fleet. Most humans felt insulted, but had no way to argue. The council's voice was final, and everyone knew it. At first, people tried to continue with life as if nothing had changed. They kept building peaceful ships meant for transport, farming, medical aid, and mining. The engineers who worked in those sectors tried to ignore the new rule, but it stayed at the back of their minds like a quiet reminder that they were considered weak. Many of them had dreamed of building strong fleets one day, not to attack anyone, but to protect their own worlds. Now that dream was locked away. A group of engineers worked at a frontier station where ships came for repairs. They were skilled, patient, and hardworking. They often heard visitors talk about dangers beyond the settled regions. Some ships arrived damaged by pirates who targeted lonely routes. When these attacked ships came in for repairs, the crew always explained the same thing. They had no fleet to defend them. They were easy targets because humanity had no strong ships allowed by the council. Every time the engineers heard those stories, their frustration grew. They did not understand why the council stopped them from protecting themselves. One evening, just before the station lights dimmed for night hours, the engineers gathered in a small workshop. They were tired, not only from the day's work, but from the heavy feeling that their people were vulnerable. They talked in low voices, because even discussing building anything strong could be misunderstood. They remembered the looks other species gave them. Those looks said humans were harmless, simple, and not worth worrying about. They remembered the times when officials joked that humans would break a warship before they even started it. They remembered the tone of disbelief whenever humans talked about engineering something advanced. The group did not decide anything big that night. Instead, they silently agreed on something small but important. If the council would not protect them, then they needed to find their own path. They would not break any rule, but they would find a way to make something strong without calling it a weapon. They believed there had to be a way to stay within the law while still preparing for danger. A few days later, an incident pushed their quiet decision forward. A warning signal reached the station, announcing that a small civilian ship was being chased by pirates near the outer belt. The station had no fleet to send. They were forced to watch on their screens as the ship tried to outrun its attackers. By chance, a patrol from another species arrived in time and scared the pirates away. The civilian ship survived, but the station workers saw the fear in the crew's eyes when they arrived. They were shaken, tired, and grateful, but their message was clear. Next time, help might not arrive in time. After that day, the engineers started staying late at work. They pretended to fix old systems or organize supplies, but in truth, they were discussing small designs for a new type of engine. They told themselves it was not a weapon, not a warship, just an engine. An engine that could save lives by moving faster than any ship currently available. That way, they were following the rules while protecting their people. It was their first small step. They worked with what they had. Spare parts, old blueprints, forgotten equipment. Nothing in their hands was illegal. They took ideas from old research left by explorers who once predicted rising threats far beyond known space. These old explorers believed humanity would one day need something powerful. The engineers felt as if those words were finally becoming true. They began testing tiny modules after work hours. Some failed instantly. Others sparked or overheated. Each failure made them more determined. They knew they were moving slowly, but they were moving. They kept their work carefully hidden. They avoided secret codes and instead used simple signals. A tool placed in a certain spot meant a meeting. A set of lights left on in the workshop meant a new idea. They trusted each other completely because one mistake could bring inspectors to their door. If the council learned they were building anything advanced, they could lose their jobs or be banned from engineering altogether. Still, the risk felt necessary. They were not trying to go against anyone. They only wanted to stop living in fear. The station had a mixed population. Workers from different planets passed through every week. Some questioned why humans seemed so restless. Others assumed humans were simply overthinking as usual. No one suspected that a quiet project was growing in the shadows of the repair base. The team always acted normal during the day. They fixed damaged ships, greeted visitors, and followed all official rules. Their calm behavior hid everything happening behind closed doors. As weeks passed, they began to expand their idea. A fast engine alone was not enough. They needed a power source that could run without overheating. They needed a frame that could support sudden acceleration. They needed a control system that reacted instantly to danger. Every new idea created a new problem. Every problem forced them to think harder. But they kept going. They talked less and worked more, moving with a silent purpose. One night, while they were testing a small fuel chamber, the lamps flickered. The chamber cracked open. A burst of light shot across the room, followed by a quiet hiss. For a moment, they thought a fire would break out, but the system shut down on its own. When the light faded, everyone stared at the broken chamber. It had lasted longer than anything they tested before. It was their first sign of progress. During that same week, they saw news reports of rising attacks on distant trade routes. More ships were being damaged. More families were left with losses. People across the human colonies began to ask why they had no way to defend themselves. The council only repeated the same explanation. Humans were not ready. Humans needed more time before they could be trusted with powerful ships. But the engineers who saw broken ships every day knew the truth. Time was running out. Even with their small progress, the team felt the pressure rising. They risked discovery every time they stayed late. They risked everything each time they tested a new part. But whenever doubt crept into their minds, they remembered the frightened faces of those rescued civilians. They remembered how helpless everyone felt during the attack. They remembered how it felt to wait for help that might never arrive. The group did not speak loudly or make promises. They simply worked. Quiet determination replaced fear. Their shared goal became a quiet bond stronger than any rule holding them back. Each night, one idea led to another. A failed test became a new design. A damaged part became inspiration for something stronger. As their project grew, so did their confidence. They did not call it a warship. They called it protection, safety, a chance for humans to stand on equal ground. The more they worked, the clearer something became. They were not building this for pride. They were building it for survival. And even though the galaxy doubted them, they believed they could prove everyone wrong by simply doing what they did best. Humans had always survived by building what they needed. Now they needed something stronger than ever before. And they were ready to create it, even if no one believed they could. The days after the first incident moved slowly, and every person at the frontier station felt a change in the air. People talked quietly in hallways, shops, and docking areas. They had watched the attack on the civilian ship too closely to forget it. Even ordinary workers who had nothing to do with engineering kept asking the same question. How long could humans keep depending on others to save them? The crew who had barely escaped with their lives said it clearly. They were lucky a patrol from another species showed up at the right time. If help came 5 minutes later, everything might have ended differently. That thought stayed with everyone. Inside the workshop, the small team of engineers felt the weight more than anyone else. They saw damaged ships every day. They listened to the stories people brought with them. They repaired broken hulls, burned panels, and shattered controls. Each repair reminded them that humanity had no real protection. They worked during the day like everyone else, but their minds stayed on their secret project. They were not building a weapon. They were not breaking any law. They were simply trying to create something strong enough to save lives before the next warning signal appeared. Every night, after the station lights dimmed, they stayed back. The workshop became quieter than usual. Only the soft hum of machines and the light tapping of tools filled the space. They began gathering old notes and forgotten research that explorers had left behind years ago. These explorers traveled far beyond known territory and discovered unusual patterns in deep space. Their writings suggested that bigger dangers might come someday. Most people ignored those warnings, thinking they were only theories. But now, after hearing about more attacks and seeing more fear, those old notes suddenly felt important. The team found sketches of engine concepts that were never finished. They found descriptions of shield ideas that were too advanced at the time. They found pieces of plans that might become useful if the right minds put them together. They knew they had to be careful. The Council checked human stations randomly. If anyone discovered that they were working on advanced technology without permission, even if it was for protection, there would be trouble. So they broke the project into small tasks. Each task looked normal if someone saw it. A test on a power coil, a calibration on a stabilizer, a scan of a fuel tank. Nothing looked suspicious on its own. They spoke only when necessary. Most of the time, they communicated with gestures or small notes that they erased after reading. Their trust for each other grew stronger because they knew one mistake could expose everything. They were aware of the risk, but none of them wanted to stop. Whenever someone felt worried, they remembered the faces of the rescued passengers, the fear in their eyes, the way they held each other when they arrived at the station. That memory pushed the team forward more than anything else. As they worked, they realized that building a fast engine was not enough. If a ship escaped danger, it still needed some way to protect itself, even for a few moments. So the team began experimenting with shield emitters. They used old generator parts and combined them in new ways. Nothing illegal, nothing banned, just creative engineering. The first few tests were disappointing. The shield flickered for less than a second. Another test created a spark loud enough to make everyone jump. But each failure taught them something new. They slowly understood the flow of energy better. They started adjusting the angles of the emitters. They tried different materials for the coils. The shield began lasting longer with each attempt. Outside the workshop, life at the station went on, but the tension kept rising. Every week brought new reports. A mining ship lost signal. A transport vessel was hit and barely made it to safety. Families traveling between colonies felt unsafe. People started avoiding long routes unless they absolutely had to travel. Some even moved back to central worlds instead of staying on outer colonies. It was the first time in years that humans felt cornered. They were not weak. They were simply unprotected. The Council kept repeating the same explanations, but no one felt comforted anymore. One afternoon, a pair of inspectors arrived unexpectedly. They were not from human colonies. They were from the Council. Their job was to check whether stations were following technology rules. They walked through the hangars, looking at tools, scanning storage rooms, asking questions. Their presence made everyone nervous, especially the engineers. They acted calm, but their hearts raced. If the inspectors walked into the wrong corner, saw a hidden part, or asked the wrong question, everything could fall apart. But the inspectors did not find anything unusual. The team had planned well. Every risky component was hidden inside ordinary equipment. Every test piece was mixed with regular maintenance materials. For now, they were safe. That night, the team worked in silence for a long time. They knew the pressure was only growing. The council was watching more closely now, and that meant they had to work smarter, not faster. They began redesigning their approach. Instead of building big pieces, they focused on smaller parts that could be hidden even better. A tiny power core, a compact conductor, a silent cooling system. They wanted each piece to look harmless on its own. Only when combined would they form something powerful. It became a puzzle that required patience and clever thinking. The station's supply logs became their secret tool. Old or unused parts were often written off and forgotten. Those were the parts they took. They repaired them, modified them, and used them in ways no one expected. They never took anything new or anything monitored. Everything came from leftovers. That made it easier to stay invisible. If someone checked the storage list, nothing would look missing. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the team built something unusual. A prototype engine that glowed faintly without overheating. A compact generator that hummed softly instead of rattling. A stabilizer that reacted faster than normal. They placed them together and held their breath. This was the moment that would tell them whether they were moving in the right direction or chasing a dream that could never become real. They activated the engine for the first time, expecting noise or smoke. Instead, a soft vibration filled the workshop. A blue light ran along the surface of the fuel chamber. The engine remained steady for a full minute. When they shut it down, everyone looked at each other, surprised and relieved. It was not a finished engine, but it was one step. A step nobody believed humans could take. A step that proved creativity and determination mattered more than rules or doubt. Outside the workshop, the galaxy continued to show signs of unrest. More species began strengthening their borders. Some allied worlds started preparing for conflicts far from human colonies. Humans were told not to worry, but everyone could feel something shifting. Even the inspectors who came earlier returned sooner than expected, checking everything with sharper eyes. This time they examined every corner of the working bays. Again, the team stayed calm. They had hidden everything with more care. The inspectors left without finding anything. The team knew they could not celebrate. They could not relax. Instead, they focused on the next part of their project. They began creating a power conductor capable of handling sudden bursts of energy. They designed it to absorb shock instead of breaking. The first two attempts failed quickly. The conductor melted. It cracked. It bent out of shape. But failure was expected. They kept adjusting the thickness, shape, and cooling lines. Eventually, they created a piece that held steady even when pushed to its limit. At the same time, they worked on improving the shield emitter. They wanted it to last longer than a few seconds. They wanted a shield that could give a ship enough time to escape, even if the attacker was strong. This idea became their main goal. They were not building a ship to fight. They were building something that could outrun danger and survive long enough to get away. That made their work feel more justified and safer in their minds. Another problem appeared when the station received orders for a full inventory update. That meant officials would check every tool, every part, every storage unit. The team had to move fast. They took apart the prototype and hid each piece separately in different locations. They stayed calm, even when their hands shook. When the inspection day arrived, they acted like everything was normal. They answered questions politely. They explained their tasks in simple words. The officials finished their check and left without noticing anything wrong. Later that night, when the station finally went quiet, the team gathered the hidden pieces again. The moment they reassembled the parts, they felt something powerful. Their project had survived another risk. That meant it deserved to continue. They fixed damaged sections, cleaned the parts, and improved their designs. They talked softly while working, discussing the next steps. They realized they needed something else, a control system unlike the ones used in normal ships. The usual systems were slow when reacting to threats. Their ship needed to think faster. That required building a system from scratch. It was the hardest part so far, but they started anyway. They planned a layout that responded instantly to changes. They wanted something that reacted like a human instinct, fast and precise. They tested the system again and again. It slowed, it froze, it overloaded. But eventually, after many long nights, it responded smoothly. By this time, the entire team understood that their P. The weeks following their first real success felt different for everyone at the station. The team had created something small but powerful, and that changed the way they looked at every task. They started seeing possibilities everywhere. Every broken part, every discarded tool, every damaged ship brought new ideas. But progress also brought pressure. News of attacks kept reaching the station, and each story felt heavier than the last. People talked about missing ships and damaged transports as if danger had become normal. Everyone pretended to stay calm, but fear lived quietly behind their words. For the engineering team, the biggest worry was the growing attention from the council. The inspectors who had visited earlier sent new notices. They said more checks were coming. The team knew it was because the attacks were increasing, and the council wanted to make sure humans were not trying to build something against the rules. The inspectors did not understand that the team's project was not meant to break any rules. It was meant to save lives when no one else could. Still, rules were rules, and the team had to hide everything even more carefully. One afternoon, 2 new inspectors arrived without warning. They wore official badges and walked with the kind of confidence that showed they were trained to notice small details. They checked the hangars, questioned workers, scanned equipment, and asked about unusual activity. The team answered every question calmly, even though inside their hearts were pounding. The inspectors paused near the workshop door for a long moment. They looked around as if they sensed something hidden. But after a minute, they moved on. When they left the station, everyone finally breathed again. That night, the team gathered quietly. They knew they needed to be more careful. The project was growing, and it was becoming harder to hide. They decided to break every large part into smaller pieces so nothing looked unusual. A large power core became 5 tiny modules. A shield emitter became several harmless coils. Every piece looked like common maintenance equipment. Only the team knew how they fit together. They planned to work slower, smarter, and more silently. Despite the pressure, their progress continued. The prototype engine was stable enough for more tests. They ran it again and again. Each time, it stayed active longer. The vibration felt steady, and the soft blue glow showed that the energy flow had improved. They had built something stronger than anything humans currently used. It was not a war engine. It was not a weapon engine. It was an advanced propulsion system that could save countless lives. As the engine improved, they shifted their focus to the shield generator. They wanted something that could survive a real attack for at least a few seconds. That small window could give a ship time to escape. They believed that even a few seconds could save hundreds of lives. Their early shield tests flickered. Sometimes the energy spread unevenly. Sometimes it collapsed too quickly. One test created a sharp, loud crack that echoed through the workshop. The team froze, listening to make sure no one outside heard. But the noise had been soft enough to blend with the usual sounds of the station. After many failed attempts, they adjusted the emitter angles, changed the coil material, and rebuilt the energy stabilizer. When they tried again, The shield formed in a gentle curve around the module. It stayed for almost 5 full seconds. The glow was unstable, but it held long enough for the team to smile for the first time in days. They had created something the Council never expected humans to build. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was brilliant. Outside the workshop, tension continued to rise. People whispered about rumors coming from other stations. Some said an unknown group of pirates was growing stronger. Others believed a foreign species was preparing for conflict. Most people did not know what to believe. They only knew the galaxy felt less safe each day. Human colonies started asking for more protection, but the Council refused to allow humans to build any strong ships. They said humans needed more time before they could handle responsibilities like that. The team disagreed with every word of that decision. They felt their people had run out of time already. While fear grew outside, another problem grew inside the team. They needed more materials. They had reached a point where basic parts were not enough. They needed stronger metals, better wiring, and more stable fuel sources. But getting these things without drawing attention was difficult. They discussed it for days, trying to find a way. Eventually, they found a solution. They began repairing damaged parts from ships with more care. Any part that was too damaged to use was marked for disposal. But instead of throwing it away, they kept it hidden and salvaged anything useful. They melted down certain metals. They cleaned old wiring. They used fragments of broken panels to reinforce new components. Everything they used was recycled from work that was part of their normal job. Those recycled materials gave them what they needed to build a stronger engine frame. They tested it by attaching the prototype engine to the new support. They activated it and watched as the frame held firm. The vibration was smoother, the glow brighter. It was the best result they had seen so far. After shutting it down, they stood quietly, letting the moment sink in. They were no longer working on ideas. They were working on something real. But progress always brought new challenges. One night, while they were testing the cooling system, the workshop door almost opened. They heard footsteps approach. The lights outside flickered. They quickly shut everything down, covered the parts, and pretended to work on normal repairs. The door opened slightly, and a fellow worker peeked inside. He said he needed a small tool. The team acted calm and handed it to him. As soon as he left, they waited in silence until the hallway emptied. They realized how close they had come to being discovered. From that night onward, they worked with the workshop door locked and used low lights to avoid attention. Their biggest challenge came when they tried to build the new control system. This system would be the heart of the future ship. It had to respond instantly. It had to guide the engine, the shield, and the navigation without slowing down. They studied old models, but none of them were fast enough. They needed something completely new. The team worked for weeks to build the basic structure. It kept crashing. It overheated. It shut down without warning. At one point, they grew so frustrated that they considered giving up on the control system and focusing on simpler parts. But they knew a ship could not survive without a fast control system. So they tried again. A breakthrough came when one member suggested combining 2 different stabilizer types. It was a strange idea, one that engineers normally avoided. But they tested it anyway. To their surprise, the system stayed active longer. It responded quicker. It processed changes almost instantly. They spent the next several nights improving that design. When they tested it again, the control system reacted smoothly to every command. It was far from perfect, but it was the closest thing to success they had seen. At the same time, more ships arrived with heavy damage. The stories from the crews grew more frightening. People said the attackers were stronger than before. Some said the attackers used advanced technology that humans had never seen. The team listened quietly as they repaired each ship. They heard the fear in every voice. They saw the stress on every face. They knew the galaxy was changing faster than anyone expected. The station leaders called for a meeting. They told everyone to stay alert. They warned them that travel routes were becoming unsafe. They said patrols from allied species were stretched thin and could not protect every area. The team listened from the back of the room. Each word from the leaders only strengthened their belief that their secret project was necessary. The galaxy was not going to wait for humans to be ready. The danger was already here. After the meeting, the team gathered in the workshop. The atmosphere was heavier than usual. They knew their work could no longer move at a slow pace. They needed to speed up, but without making mistakes. They needed to push themselves, but without getting caught. They decided to set a new goal. They would finish the core systems before the end of the season. It was a big challenge, but they believed they could do it. They tested the shield again and saw the glow last longer. They ran the engine and watched it stay stable. They connected the new control system and felt a spark of hope when it responded smoothly. Every part seemed closer to being ready. They were tired, but they kept working. They were scared, but they kept going. They believed in what they were building. Even if the rest of the galaxy doubted them. As the season moved forward, the team reached another milestone. They managed to link the engine, shield, and control system together in one silent test. They activated it for only a few seconds to avoid drawing attention. The systems responded. The lights flickered softly. For the first time, the team saw the beginning of something that could change everything. They shut it down quickly and looked at each other. They knew what they had built was still small, still incomplete, but it was proof that humans could create something powerful, something advanced, something the Council did not believe they were ready for. And they were only halfway through their journey. Their project had survived pressure, fear, inspections, and doubt. And now it stood at the edge of becoming real. The team knew the hardest challenges were still ahead, but they were ready to fight. The project entered a stage where every small mistake felt heavier than anything they had faced before. The secret ship was no longer just an idea or a metal frame. It was a living structure. Its walls hummed with silent power. Its core sat in the center like a sleeping heart. Everyone in the hidden facility knew they were only weeks away from the moment that could change the fate of their entire species. Yet the closer they got to finishing it, the more the pressure grew. Even the quietest person in the team carried a storm in their eyes. Every morning started the same way. The team gathered around the central board, a glowing table filled with updates, numbers, and warnings. The air smelled of metal and warm circuits. Days were long, nights even longer. People worked until their hands shook and their voices cracked. No one complained. They all felt the same thing. If they failed, humanity would lose more than just a project. They would lose their right to stand proudly in the galaxy. Rumors had started to spread across the outer stations that something unusual was happening near the asteroid cluster. A few patrol ships had reported strange metal signals. Nothing pointed to humans directly, but the Council who controlled the galaxy's rules wasn't foolish. They had lived long enough to expect trouble from anyone they underestimated. The idea that humans might be creating something forbidden had begun to bother them. The team knew these whispers were dangerous. If the Council became suspicious, they would send inspectors. Inspectors meant scanners, scanners meant discovery, and discovery meant the end. So the team worked in silence, staying cautious in every movement. Messages were kept offline, and no one was allowed to contact families except under strict rules. The ship had become their home, their obligation, and their burden. One evening, when the lights dimmed in the long corridor, a soft alarm echoed through the place. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to stop every conversation instantly. The sound meant only one thing. A patrol ship had entered the silent zone. The zone was supposed to remain empty. It was their warning ring. When someone crossed it, they had to freeze everything. The team rushed to the control room. The patrol ship's signal blinked on the screen like a cold eye watching them. It wasn't a big ship, but big enough to ruin everything if it scanned too deeply. The team stared at the blinking light, none of them saying a word. They waited to see if the ship would move on. DIDN single quotes D. It slowed down. Silence broke into a quiet panic. Some felt their heartbeat skip. Some felt their stomach tighten. The engineers looked at the project leader, waiting for instructions. The leader breathed deeply, trying to hide the stress. "Shut down all external power lines," he said in a low voice. Panels clicked off one by one. The giant ship inside the hangar dimmed until it became a dark shadow. The patrol ship scanned the area. The hidden facility had one advantage. It was built inside a hollowed asteroid, shielded with ancient metal that made it look like a dead rock from the outside. But if the patrol scanned with deep energy pulses, the heat signatures inside could be exposed. Everyone waited. The patrol ship made one slow circle, then another. The team kept their breath still, as if breathing too loudly could give them away. Then at last, the ship drifted off. The moment the radar showed it leaving the silent zone, people exhaled together. Some even sat on the floor from relief. For a moment, the fear turned into renewed determination. They knew this wasn't their first scare, and it wouldn't be their last. The patrol's visit was proof that the galaxy was starting to get suspicious. If they didn't finish the ship soon, they would lose the chance. The team returned to their stations with shaking hands but stronger hearts. They worked faster, more carefully, more focused. The days that followed were heavy. Meals were skipped. Sleep hours shortened. No one cared anymore about comfort. Every progress felt like pushing a mountain uphill. The ship's core needed perfect tuning. Even a tiny mistake could cause the entire system to break. Workers walked around with tired eyes, holding data pads, reading codes, adjusting wires, testing circuits. The ship felt almost awake, but as much as the team was working, the pressure from outside was growing just as fast. More patrol reports came in. The council started asking questions about unusual energy spikes in the region. People on other space stations started gossiping about humans acting strange. These whispers might seem small, but small whispers could turn into dangerous storms. One night, when most of the team was asleep on their chairs and floors, the project leader went inside the ship alone. He touched the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking about victory or glory. He was thinking about the millions of people who had no idea what was happening here. People who lived simple lives. People who trusted the team without knowing it. The leader whispered softly to the quiet room, "We can't fail." The ship didn't answer, but the soft hum of its systems felt like a promise. The final tests began. Engines were activated for a few seconds at a time. The core glowed brighter each day. The navigation systems lit up the main cabin. A warm golden light ran through the panels, making the ship look alive. For the first time, the team saw how powerful the vessel truly was. It wasn't aggressive, but strong. Not made to dominate, but made to protect. It was built not out of anger, but out of necessity. That didn't matter to the council. They didn't care why humans built it. They only cared about the rule that said humans were too young to be trusted with warships. The team had heard stories of other species being punished just for thinking about breaking the rule. The council controlled everything and expected everyone to obey, but humans had never been a quiet species. They dreamed too big, moved too fast, and refused to stay small. That was why they were here, working in secret, risking everything. 2 days before the final activation test, another patrol ship came into the silent zone. This time, it didn't fly past. It parked. It stayed. and it didn't move for hours. Fear returned again, heavier than before. Everyone stared at the radar, as if they could push the threat away by looking at it. The patrol ship wasn't scanning aggressively, but its presence alone was alarming. Some of the team members whispered that maybe it had found something suspicious. Maybe it was waiting for backup. Maybe this was the end, but the leader ordered everyone to stay calm. No lights were turned on. No noise was made. The team sat in darkness, waiting for what felt like a lifetime. The ship finally drifted away, long after their nerves had already broken. That moment changed them. They realized time was running out. If they didn't launch the ship soon, the council would catch them. So they made a decision. They would skip some of the small tests and move straight to the final activation. It was risky. Something might fail. But delaying was even more dangerous. Everyone gathered around the massive ship the next morning. Some had trembling hands. Some tried to hide their fear behind deep breaths. The leader gave a short message, not a speech, but simple words meant to steady everyone's heart. We came this far because we believed in something bigger than fear. Now we finish what we started. The engines were ready. The core pulsed softly. The doors of the hangar were sealed shut. No one knew what would happen next, but they all knew this was the moment everything would change. What they didn't know was that the council had already sent a larger patrol fleet toward the region. The next hours would decide everything. Humanity's courage, their future, and their right to stand tall in the galaxy depended on one final test. And the ship, silent and powerful, waited for its first heartbeat to awaken. The final day arrived quietly, but everyone could feel something heavy in the air. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The team stood around the ship, some with tools still in their hands, some with tired eyes. They had not rested properly for months. No one needed to speak. They all knew what was about to happen. This moment was the reason they had risked their careers, their safety, and even their place in the galaxy. The ship's core glowed faintly, like a heartbeat waiting to rise. Thick cables ran across the floor, humming softly. The hangar lights flickered as the main systems warmed up. Every small sound felt louder than usual. People exchanged glances that carried more meaning than words. They were scared, but they were ready. Outside the hidden facility, something far more worrying was happening. The Council's patrol fleet had entered the outer ring. 10 ships, each one equipped with deep scan abilities, moved slowly toward the asteroid cluster. Their formation was tight and cautious. They believed someone was hiding something, and they wanted answers. If they found the hidden base, there would be no time to negotiate or explain. The Council didn't wait. They acted first, questioned later. Inside the hangar, a soft alarm blinked on the screen. Someone rushed to check it and froze. A message appeared in bright red letters. The patrol fleet was only a short distance away. The team felt their stomachs tighten. They didn't have hours anymore. They didn't even have a full hour. They had minutes. The project leader looked at everyone and nodded once. The message was clear. It was now or never. Engineers ran to their stations. Technicians slid across the floor, activating final switches. The core chamber lit up completely, casting a warm glow across the metal walls. The ship looked alive now, no longer just a project or an idea. It was ready to move, ready to prove that humans were capable of more than the Council ever allowed them to be. The leader stood near the main control board. His voice was low but steady as he gave the final order. Start activation. The floor vibrated. The ship released a deep, powerful hum that echoed through every corner of the facility. Panels lit up in sequence, one after another, like stars turning on in the night sky. The main engine coils heated up, spreading a soft golden light. Workers watched with wide eyes. Some held their breath. Some gripped the railings because their hands were shaking, but something unexpected happened. One of the side engines flickered. The panel showed a warning. The system wasn't responding properly. A few people ran toward it, checking the wires, checking the circuits. "It's overloaded," one of them whispered. The leader didn't panic. "Fix it fast. We don't have time." The workers tried everything they could. They shut down the smaller lines, redirected energy, adjusted the fuel core. Sweat rolled down their faces, even though the room was cool. They could hear the distant movement outside the base. The scanners from the patrol fleet were starting their first sweep. Everyone knew what that meant. If the scanners went deep enough, the heat signatures from inside the asteroid would show up clearly. They would be discovered long before the ship could take off. The team fought the engine issue with everything they had. The alarm beeped nonstop, a reminder that every second mattered. The leader stared at the main screen, showing the patrol fleet's position. They were getting closer. Time was nearly gone. Finally, after what felt like an entire lifetime squeezed into a minute, the engine stabilized. The warning light turned off. The team collectively breathed out, but no one relaxed. There was no time to rest. "Activate full power," the leader ordered. The ship responded instantly. A deep thrum grew inside its frame. The glow from the core brightened. The outer wings shifted slightly, adjusting themselves. The engines released a soft vibration that shook the tools lying on nearby tables. Then the entire facility lost gravity for a split second as the engines spiked to maximum potential. It felt like the whole place had taken a single giant breath. Outside the asteroid, the patrol fleet locked onto the rising energy signal. The council officers inside those ships stared at their screens, eyes widening. This was no mining activity. This wasn't a normal power spike. This was something they had forbidden not in the hangar. The team prepared for launch. People strapped themselves to the control chairs. Others held onto bars fixed into the walls. The leader watched the ship as it rose slightly from the platform, hovering for the first time. The floor shook under them. The air moved in waves. The ship was ready. But the patrol fleet was already approaching the asteroid. Their weapons weren't active yet, but their scanners were glowing with high energy. They had found something. They were changing direction, aiming directly at the base. The leader saw this on the radar screen and made the decision he had been avoiding. He walked to the communication panel. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the weight of the entire human race. Launch now. The hangar platform split open. Thick metal doors slid aside until the dark space outside appeared, cold and endless. Wind rushed into the room. The lights flickered again. The ship hovered higher, its engines roaring softly. The moment the final latch unlocked, the ship shot forward like a beam of light. The entire hangar trembled from the force. People shielded their eyes from the sudden burst. Outside the asteroid, the ship broke free into open space. Its engines left a bright trail behind it, cutting through the darkness like a rising sunrise. The patrol fleet immediately changed formation, trying to chase it, but the new human ship was far beyond anything they had ever seen. It moved faster, smoother, and stronger than the Council expected humans to ever create. The team watched from the hangar screen as the ship flew out. Some cried quietly. Some laughed from relief. Some just stared in silence, unable to believe they had actually done it. But the moment of peace didn't last. The Council officers on the patrol fleet reacted quickly. They tried to block the ship's path. They tried to trap it between their formation. They even sent warnings, ordering whoever was piloting it to stop. The ship didn't slow down, it didn't fire a weapon, it simply rose higher, moving around the patrol ships with speed and precision they couldn't match. The Council officers realized they were dealing with something far beyond their calculations. This wasn't a warship made to attack. It was a warship made to survive. Inside the hidden base, the team watched the patrol ships fail to keep up. They saw their ship fly past the last line of council control. It moved with power, confidence, and grace. It was everything they had hoped it would be, but something even more surprising happened. The ship sent a signal back to the base. It was simple. Just a short message. We made it. That message brought silent tears to many faces. It wasn't just an update. It was a reminder of why they started. They weren't fighting to break rules. They weren't trying to cause fear. They were proving that humans were capable of standing among the stars without being chained by limits others set on them. As the ship disappeared into the distance, heading toward deep space where no patrol could follow it, the team felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had created something impossible. They had risked everything. And they had succeeded. The council would question them, investigate them, maybe even punish them. But the truth was already out. The first unstoppable human warship existed. It was real, and it was free. Across the galaxy, people would soon hear stories. Some would doubt them. Some would fear them. Some would admire the courage behind it. But one thing was certain. Humanity had taken a step that could never be taken back. The team stood together, quietly watching the last spark of light fade from the screen. Their ship was out there now, carving a new path for their species. They knew the road ahead would be hard. But they also knew something else. No one could say again that humans weren't allowed to build something powerful. Because they had already done it. They had built the unstoppable.